Most cookbook authors, readers, and users consider cookbooks very differently, as entirely apolitical works. If a cookbook is merely a repository of techniques, for example, cook this for 45 minutes, stirring once, as they presume, then it seems more like a manual than a political text. From this viewpoint, cookbooks are devoid of politics, and to claim that they operate along lines of power, distinction, and community seems counterintuitive at best, provocatively misleading at worst. As an introductory exercise, not as a template for the forthcoming chapters, consider 4 ways in which one might admit cookbooks as having or doing politics, arranged from the most overt to the most subtle and so far unrecognized. Briefly, they are these. They could be organized and sold by political organizations and fundraisers affiliated with particular political parties. They also could be seen as replicating and reinforcing political barriers and boundaries. They might act to perpetuate practices of ideology or community. And most counterintuitively, there might be a politics of their very form, the format of the cookbook. The first category consists of those cookbooks put together for overtly political party purposes, either to raise money for a political cause or to reinforce kinds of political loyalty. In 1984, for example, a group of American political activists collected recipes from prominent Democratic Party politicians and their wives to compile a cookbook entitled How to Cook Reagan's Goose. Meant to raise money, the cookbook also highlighted important party actors and activists, while also presumably reinforcing the affiliations that those cooking from it would feel with the policies of those politicians. To make easy chicken cacciatore, a favorite dish of then-Senator Howard Metzenbaum of Ohio, for instance, would connect the cook to the Democrats, strengthening party affiliation along domestic lines. Many other United States cookbooks produced by local and national political affiliates also attempt to encourage women to cook like a Republican or Democrat in order to strengthen party identification, organization, and fundraising. But these are uncommon kinds of cookbooks, unusual both in their production and in their distribution. What sort of gourmand would buy a cookbook in order to cook the dishes favored by a politician with national aspirations? Far more common, and certainly more familiar, are the second kind of political cookbooks, those that replicate and reinforce political boundaries or barriers. The National Cookbook, one that concentrates on Chinese food or Mexican cooking, is typical of this kind. Such a book implicitly presumes the universality of a nation, promising the cook that she can experience and recreate the food of that state. Sometimes written for an external audience, as when an Italian cookbook is published by a British publisher in English, and sometimes for an internal audience, as when an Italian cookbook is published by an Italian press in Italian. Such a book not only presumes the naturalness of the Italian people, but also reinforces their collective identity through food culture. Of course, the nation is not the only sort of political boundary that cookbooks emphasize and reduplicate. Throughout this book, various cookbooks will be examined that emphasize regionality as more important. Cookbooks can focus on cities such as New Orleans. They may emphasize the continuity and homogeneity of larger regional areas. A book dedicated to Tuscan food or to the flavors of Provence marks out those places as different from the rest of the country. In each case, the affiliations among a large set of recipes work precisely because they buy into and reinforce the presumption that certain proximities of taste and culture coincide with geography, that a region and its food emerge naturally from one another. The geographically bounded cookbook proves an enduring staple in the cookbook publisher's larder. Other cookbooks, however, enact and reflect other affiliations that are not spatial. This third type of political cookbook concerns itself not with a region, but with cultural, ethnic, or social affiliations. Many cookbooks reproduce cuisines of different groups within nation-states. Recipes in a cookbook of American soul food may share certain regional affiliations, kinds of food available primarily in the southern U.S. states, but ultimately serve more as a stand-in for race.